Welcome to the second episode of the Boon of Wireless, coming to you high above the streets of northern New Jersey at ANJ Media. Yes, New Jersey, where it's still illegal to pump your own gas. Anyway, I'm your host, John Horowitz from Atrium Unlimited Consulting. What is the Boon of Wireless? If you missed our first episode, a boon is something that is helpful or beneficial. For example, adequate and free parking at the shopping center would be a boon for the shoppers. It also means something that is helpful or improves the quality of life. Obviously, the wireless telecom industry has seen its share of boons. And in this podcast, what we hope to do is share some knowledge, educate, and speak with the movers and shakers in the wireless industry. Our guest today has extensive multinational and telecom experience, overseeing strategy, revenue, customer acquisition, operations, partner portfolio, and retention functions. Dan Thygesen is currently Senior Vice President and General Manager with full P&L accountability for the T-Mobile Wholesale line of business. Dan's responsible for the strategy, the business development, account management, product management, operations, and delivery organizations. Before joining T-Mobile USA, Dan had various other positions in the telco industry and spent several years living in Japan, Korea, and Thailand. Dan is fluent in Japanese, so if you're looking to score some shabu shabu or okonomiyaki, Dan is your man.
Wow, thank you, John. I really appreciate the introduction. And I didn't know you spoke Japanese as well. That's amazing.
Dan, welcome to the broadcast. I appreciate your time, and it's been a pleasure working with you over the years. So why don't we just jump right into it? You've been running the wholesale division for T-Mobile for quite some time, and obviously the MVNO side is nothing but change. That's the only constant that we have going on right now. Give us your overview of the current MVNO business in the United States, if you would.
Well, I think from a T-Mobile perspective, we're in an amazing place in terms of how we sort of operationalize and go to market from a wholesale perspective. MVNO specifically. By the way, we'll probably sort of move in and out of my description of MVNOs to also include IoT. The mechanics of, I think, how a solution provider takes a value proposition, brings it together to life with the network and takes it to market is very similar between those two. But for the most part, the big players in the market today are indeed MVNOs. It's a really interesting time, especially on the T-Mobile side. We've got this massive network availability that came, so much of that spectrum came to us from the acquisition of Sprint. And so it's really up to us now on the wholesale side in particular, to monetize that capacity, to monetize that network. And the way that we do that is we get super aggressive in looking for partners, building the portfolio, talking to as many people as we can, investigating lots of interesting, unique, innovative ideas. And so, that creates a lot of excitement in the marketplace because we're looking to enable more and more people to come on. So from my perspective, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of growth opportunity. And, I have an organization that's out searching for new MVNOs pretty much 24/7, 365 days a year. Now, it's, and I've heard, I'll even quote you a little bit. It's not easy. It's not easy becoming an MVNO. It can be expensive. It really depends on how you think about bringing yourself to market and what your value proposition is. And certainly that has to be something that is fairly distinct and different from anybody else that's operating in the marketplace so that you can really sort of focus on your niche. But I think, with the power of T-Mobile's network and the opportunity from my intent to grow the business, that the door's wide open and we're, inviting as many people to come have those conversations with us as possible. So from that perspective, like the MVNO, segment is alive and doing its best to thrive. But again, it comes down to, do you have an interesting value proposition? Do you know how to operate a business? Have you thought through, the big pieces of the puzzle? Like, what are you planning to offer in the marketplace? How do you differentiate yourself? What does your distribution look like? Do you have a loyalty program? Are you layering on interesting value-added services, which, happy to talk a little bit more about as well, that help differentiate you from just a potential, wireless operator that's trying to race to the bottom with price being your primary value.
Right. Right. Well, you've answered all of my questions so far, Dan. So thank you. We're going to talk a little bit later in the podcast about how easy it is now to become an MVNO. Like MVNO in a box. If you Google that, it's thousands and millions of things. And the interesting thing is, my consulting business, we deal 98% in the MVNO space and people that want to get into the market. And this will lead into our next question. Everybody wants to be the next Mint Mobile because Ryan Reynolds got on TV and apparently, not apparently, but you guys have announced your intent to purchase, Mint Mobile along with the two other companies that are held by their parent, Ultra Mobile, one of your largest MVNOs, as well as Plum, one of your aggregators. So it's interesting, and I'll talk on what you quoted me on the differentiator and the distribution strategy, because a lot of people that call, they just don't know. They think it's a money trail, and let's put my name on the box and we're off to the races. It's we turn down more people than we actually put in front of you folks. But before we get to that, it seems from my standpoint that T-Mobile is probably, out of the three carriers, probably the most aggressive right now in the wholesale space. Is that a fact, or is that something that maybe I'm seeing with blinders on, or could you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope we are. I mean, I think you'd probably have a better perspective. You get a chance to sort of see all three of the operators, and maybe to some extent Dish compete in the marketplace for business. We want to be. I mean, I absolutely want to be the most aggressive, the most open, the most intent on creating a portfolio that allows more and more sort of innovation to come into the marketplace, and a lot more interesting value propositions that people are looking for. So I like the idea that we're, the spectrum, again, it goes back to the spectrum, and the capacity on the network is a huge, huge upside for us. Our 5G advantage and the work that the engineering teams have done to deploy that as a technology have just, sort of been unprecedented, literally. And so we want to take advantage of that the best we can. So we're trying to be as aggressive as possible. We're trying to, you'll see us speaking at all kinds of engagements. We travel around the country quite a bit. We're trying to meet as many people as we can. I speak at the big 5G event and some of the other CES, Mobile World Congress. You'll hear me say we're open for business. So we are sort of making a concerted effort to have entrepreneurs, founders, operators, big companies, small companies, anybody who's interested in propagating some kind of wireless proposition in the marketplace to know that we're here. And I don't know if I see that necessarily by any of the other telco operators, but it's a big driver for us.
Two of the recent acquisitions, and this is not my opinion, this has been written about ad nauseum in a lot of the different publications. Verizon purchasing TracFone and overnight becoming the largest prepaid carrier. Dish, obviously, with Boost, haven't gone as well as I think originally planned. And I'm not going to ask you to comment on that, but you recently announced your company recently announced the intent to purchase, like I said, your aggregator Plum, you large MVNO Ultra, as well as Mint. How have some of the other MVNOs reacted to this, that you're now buying up, their competitors?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And I'd say the majority are actually excited about the proposition. And if you kind of go down to the basics of why somebody ultimately is an entrepreneur and what they're trying to accomplish, most of our MVNOs started very small. There are a few that started large because they had brand power and a big corporation behind them. But many, by far the majority, have started small. With an idea. An entrepreneur had an idea, a founder, and he started to build momentum. And ultimately, what you see in the case of an MVNO becoming successful to the extent where somebody wants to, enable that founder's or that entrepreneur's exit strategy, it's a really, really sort of exciting thing. And to go back to why people start these businesses, it's less likely that most of these founders and entrepreneurs and innovators are starting a business so that they can manage it on their own for the rest of their lives. The intent generally is to get to a place where you can create the maximum amount of value potential and then execute on that. And generally that's by investing, selling, or being acquired by somebody larger. And so, I think there were, I didn't really have any negative feedback. I think it was more an affirmation that this is what can happen when you're an entrepreneur and your intent is to build a value proposition and a brand, and with the intent to be acquired. Like this is a Cinderella story. This is what you want to happen. And so we had a lot of positive feedback. Interestingly enough, we also had a lot of people that said, "Hey, can I be next? Can I get on that runway? Can I get on that path? Can you please acquire us?" And at the end of the day, I can't say no to that either. It's sort of like, well, let's continue to work together as strategic partners and deliver on your value proposition and create that value. And we'll see what happens, as we progress through that cycle.
Good. That gives them something to work towards. So the other aggregators, you have 3 or 4 aggregators. How do they feel they can compete now with Plum? That Plum will now be owned by the mothership, by T-Mobile. How do I, as an aggregator, compete with that?
Well, the aggregators each sort of have their own secret sauce to what they enable their MVNOs in terms of, end-to-end sort of facilities, like soup to nuts kind of value proposition around the enablement platform, the OSS, the BSS, the value-added service architecture that allows them to bolt on incremental, sort of buckets of value. Those are sort of unique by aggregator. And so I can't really say that all 4 of the aggregators are exactly the same. They tend to appeal, like when we introduce an MVNO to that group, it's exactly what we do. We say, hey, look, we have 3 or 4 aggregators. You should go out and have a conversation with each of them and figure out which one of them has sort of the best cultural fit for you, the best capability, functionality fit for what you're trying to deliver in the marketplace. And you'll see that that sort of distinguishes each of the aggregators uniquely. And so, I think it's the same thing. Nobody wants to compete against this big, telco machine. But I think if you look at the segmentation outside of ACP and some of the Lifeline stuff, you'll see that the aggregators tend to draw MVNO value proposition and brands to them that are fairly different amongst themselves. So we'll have to see sort of how it works out in the marketplace. Like we have to learn on the T-Mobile side how to actually operate an aggregator. We've got a great group of people with Plum. By the way, we're assuming the deal will be approved and go through. We're waiting for the final sort of approvals and the ability to close that deal. And then, we will run Plum as an aggregator here. It's our intent to run it as an aggregator here within the wholesale group, but it's new for us. So we've got a learning curve to be at sort of that level of operation, and we'll see how it goes from there. That's not to say that doesn't by any means minimize or diminish the importance of the relationships that I have in the market today with the other aggregators. They're very good at what they do. They're exclusive to T-Mobile. Their skill sets are a little bit different when you look at what each one provides as their own value proposition, and they're very highly valuable to me as a business owner and to T-Mobile as an operator. And we certainly don't want to do anything to jeopardize those relationships.
Good. Another thing we're waiting on, and I know this is near and dear to your heart. You mentioned the ACP program, the American Connectivity Program, which gives subsidies to those people on their broadband bill, on their wireless bill. Word was that it was going to run out of money and that Congress was going to shut it down. And again, this is a non-political show. And then they're supposed to put bipartisan bill together for $6 billion in the second quarter. Do you have any other insight that maybe our viewers would like to hear about the ACP program and where it may or may not go?
I really don't. I mean, I can
Yeah.
speculate, but that'll just probably get us all in hot water. So we're sort of in the waiting position, just like everybody
Yeah.
else. We know that there are
Okay.
some rules that are going to be implemented here, today, tomorrow, or the next day around, entry into the program. And then there's an
Okay.
expectation that without further funding, the program will essentially run out of the existing money that it has available to it, probably sometime in April, I think is where the
Yeah.
general consensus is on forecast. I know there's a lot of activity on the Hill with all politicians involved trying to find a way to align on something that renews the opportunity to push this program forward. But it really is a wait and see.
All right, let's change gears a little bit. Last month, we had the opportunity to meet at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And during our discussions, you told me about a new initiative that you were working on in T-Mobile's wholesale group to bring a new value-added type product and services to your MVNOs and to their dealers that focus on really technology type things. You mentioned IoT at the top of the broadcast, but things that could be added on, bolted on, as you said. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Give us a glimpse on what you're looking into and what you're thinking.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the things that we try to do in the wholesale line of business is exactly what the branded side of this business is doing in terms of the Un-carrier proposition. We're trying to make it just increasingly simple to do business with us. And that means often trying to find incremental things that we can put on the menu, if you will, that create value for our MVNOs. More and more things that the MVNOs can leverage from our relationship to create value for themselves and value for their brands. The most traditional sort of sense of what we enable is talk, text, and data. And those are fairly commoditized at this point, right?
Right.
And so the goal is always to try to drive the ARPU values up, but also at the same time enable a better, more enriching, more fulfilling experience for an end user as they consume services through their brand. And so we look last year we started to build a model that we expect to execute on this year. We're starting that already, where we're essentially layering a bunch of value-added services on top as a value-added service layer on top of the traditional sort of commoditized talk, text, and data. And so we think that there are a number of things that we can deliver as a value-added service, as a managed service on behalf of the network and products and services to our MVNOs and to our IoT solution providers that come with immediate scale, but also give them the opportunity to white label or rebrand these things as their own. And so if you think about some of the things that are fairly compelling that we've received a lot of feedback on that our MVNO partners are asking for, things like the ability to have a remittance service. There's an awful lot of opportunity to remit money back and forth between customers around the world. There's something like $50+ billion leaves the U.S. and goes to Mexico, for example, every year in remittance. We think there's an opportunity to disrupt that as an industry. Today, it's fairly expensive to walk into a Western Union or wherever and send money and then pay to pick up your money at the other end. And we think it'd be really interesting as a value-added service to bundle that and enable our MVNOs to basically provide that service to their end users without having to go out and negotiate the deal with the service provider, do all of the technical implementation themselves, sign up for any potential accountability or risk. Like we're intending to sort of cover off on all that on behalf of the MVNOs. So
are you becoming more and more then like an enabler? Like the enablers that are out there now, the MVNEs? Is that the goal, or are you just kind of testing the waters in that space?
Well, I think becoming an enabler is a little bit different. I mean, we do have aspirations to do this thing called wireless as a service or MVNO in a box, and I'll walk through that a little bit. But I think the value added service proposition is really just about using scale that comes with T-Mobile as a global brand to derive things that are valuable to these relationships that we have with these people that have these other products, and then finding a way to white label them and present them to my existing or go forward portfolio so that they can be monetized by my MVNOs as operators in the marketplace. So obviously, remittance is interesting. There's a loyalty program as a service that we're building. There's create a wallet as a service that we're enabling. So these are things that probably hard for MVNOs, regardless of size, to actually go out and incorporate and scale. And so we're trying to again sort of enable that part of the process for them. And then it's hopefully accretive for everybody, right?
Excellent. Well, I look forward to that because again, it's getting very competitive out there. And if again you quoted me, thank you, on you have to have a differentiator. And if you take anything from this podcast today, and you have to have a distribution model. Again, you alluded to it earlier. Phone calls come in and they say, well, what's different about you? Why would I switch from one of the major carriers or current incumbent MVNOs to come with your service? I said, well, we're going to be the lowest in price. And I politely say, thank you. Let us know how it works out. Keep in touch.
That's a hard one.
And you're not going to do that. You're not going to win on price. So anyway, listen, we'll both be attending Mobile World Congress in Barcelona the end of February. Looking forward to that. What are you looking forward to in Barcelona? And, what are your expectations for T-Mobile Wholesale?
But, Barcelona, Mobile World Congress, in both, Las Vegas but more so in Barcelona, just because of the size of the event, it's just so much larger. I really have access to so many interesting, unique, innovative organizations, people, companies. It's literally a hunting mission for us. We are out looking for partners, right? And so what tends to happen is
both domestically, U.S. and internationally.
Well, I mean, my focus is always to bring the business back to the States, right? I mean, that's our sort of core approach. But interestingly enough, it turns out there's a lot of people that operate in other parts of the world that would also love to propagate a brand proposition here in the States, right? I mean, you see a lot of success around that in other brands today, even. So what tends to happen is I go to Mobile World Congress and everybody actually tries to sell me a platform, and that's okay. But the intent really is to meet with people, to understand where the innovation is coming from in the marketplace, to identify whether there are things as part of that innovation that we can grab onto and use to create a value proposition, and to, again, sort of canvas the floor, talk to people. We have a lot of people that want to become an MVNO in the States, and so they know that T-Mobile Wholesale will have representation over in Barcelona, so the calendar is filling up pretty quick. But that is our primary intent, is to go find interesting companies and people that want to come, be an MVNO or a wholesale partner here in the States.
Should be a good show. So
it should
Dan,
be. It should be.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you for coming on to the podcast today. Before we close out, is there anything else you'd like to say about T-Mobile Wholesale, T-Mobile in general? Questions for me, maybe? I don't know. Turn it around.
Well, I would offer one more piece, and we touched on it just a little bit when we talked about value-added services, but also the aggregator plan. One of the things that we're going to deploy this year is something called wireless as a service, MVNO in a box. It's kind of another way to. And one of the things we hear often in the marketplace is that there are a lot of companies that operate. They sell things to customers that are recurring. They come back in all the time. They have a relationship with those customers. But selling something like, or being a telco or selling a wireless product isn't necessarily their sort of core competency. And when you talk about an MVNO, it does propose a bit of a heavy lift. You have to go find an MVNE to be your enabler. You have to think about your distribution. Are you going to have a customer care? Are you going to have digital only marketing? Like end to end, there's a lot of things to consider as part of operating an MVNO. And so, we're going to take that proposition, and similar to an aggregator, and we're going to package it into a box basically, and enable people that, they don't really want to be an MVNO. but the mechanics of how they might go to market looks very much like an MVNO. They want to do what they're really good at, which is selling and marketing, especially if it's to an incumbent base, like they know their customer base. So we're gonna release a product called Wireless as a Service that allows brands who do want to offer some kind of wireless proposition, but don't want to have to do all the heavy lifting of becoming an MVNO or operationalize the provisioning, the app, the e-commerce site, the customer service, the device financing, all of those things. They don't have to worry about all that. That will be a managed service that we package into one bundle and offer to companies that really just want to focus on the sales and marketing. So that's a big piece for us, I think, coming out mid-year as well. It's going to completely open the landscape and change how people think about MVNO, because you don't have to do all the heavy lifting. You can literally be really good at sales and marketing and now take advantage of putting a wireless proposition into the marketplace, similar to how an MVNO would do it if it was more traditional and they wanted to own all of those pieces together. So I'm really excited about that one as well. I think it's got great potential to allow a lot more entrance into the marketplace and to create a lot more competition and a lot more unique value propositions, drive a bunch of innovation. You probably start to hear from people that you never thought might be interested in selling a wireless product that are now, doing so here in the States. And so we're pretty excited about that as well.
Spot on, Dan, on that one. We have people that call us that are great at sales and marketing, and to your point, they don't want to do the heavy lifting. We call them the just send me the check group. We'll go out, we'll sell, we'll market, we'll make a margin. Just send us a check, and we'll load your network for you the best we can. So great. That is something that I'm personally looking forward to, and I think the industry is going to welcome with very, very open arms. Dan, thank you so much for joining the Boon of Wireless broadcast. Check us out at theboonofwireless.com, and look forward to having you on in a few more months, Dan, and we can take a look at what we talked about today and where we are as far as implementation. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you very much, John. I appreciate the opportunity. It's great to see you.